Chase misprinted lies.
On February 25, 1957, in the Fox Chase area of Philadelphia, Officer Milton Palmer received a report about something suspicious in an abandoned area on Susquehanna Road. The officer headed to the location, walking through the trees until he stumbled upon a box. When he opened it, he was shocked. A small, naked child wrapped in a blanket, with hair hastily cut. The child's body was clean, indicating that someone had bathed him recently. This marked the beginning of one of the most puzzling cases that hundreds of detectives would try to solve. A total of 400,000 images of the child were distributed, thousands of reports were investigated, and his grave was even exhumed 3 times to obtain DNA samples. Yet, no one could uncover his identity until December 2022, when modern technology finally revealed the truth. On a cold day in February 1957, in an abandoned area visited only by hunters or people dumping garbage, a university student named Frederick Benoni's was in the same location. He claimed he saw a rabbit and wanted to ensure it wasn't trapped in one of the hunter's snares. However, as he approached, he found a box. At first, Frederick thought the box contained a doll. But the next day, he heard on the radio about the disappearance of a little girl named Mary Jane Barker. Feeling uneasy, he went to the priests at his university, who advised him to inform the police. When Officer Milton Palmer arrived at the site and opened the box, he discovered that it did not contain a doll but the body of a small child. From that moment, one of the longest and strangest murder cases in Philadelphia's history began, a case that would take 65 years just to identify the victim's name. Dr. Joseph Spellman, the chief medical examiner, began examining the child's body, uncovering painful details about his final days. The child was between 4 and 6 years old, measured 105 centimeters in height, and weighed just 14 kilograms, a very low weight indicating malnutrition. His body was covered in bruises and signs of beatings, but at the same time, there were signs that someone had cared for him intermittently. He had scars from surgical procedures on his chest, pelvis, and ankle, performed by a skilled doctor. The strange thing was that the boy had no vaccination marks, suggesting he hadn't attended school or visited any known hospitals. The autopsy revealed other peculiar details. His right hand and both legs appeared waterlogged, as if they had been submerged in water for a long time before his death. His left eye was stained with a blue dye, often used by doctors to diagnose eye diseases. His hair had been cut haphazardly, with strands still found on his body and the blanket he was wrapped in. In his stomach, they found remnants of baked beans he had eaten 2 to 3 hours before his death. Due to the extreme cold, the exact time of death couldn't be determined, but it was estimated to be between 2 days and 2 weeks before the body was discovered. After the child's body was discovered, the police launched one of the largest search operations in Philadelphia's history. They initially thought identifying the child would be easy. How could a child of this age go missing without anyone reporting it? The police took the boy's fingerprints and footprints. Detective Bill Kelly, a specialist in fingerprint matching, visited every hospital in the area to search for a match for the boy's footprints. Unfortunately, records at the time weren't as complete or organized as they are today. The police then decided to take an extraordinary step. They printed 400,000 copies of the boy's photo and included them with gas and electricity bills sent to every household in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, the pictures they distributed were of the child after his death, which was highly unusual, but the police were desperate for anyone to recognize him. Not only that, but they also allowed people to come and view the body at the morgue. Additionally, the police sent the photos to different states. Hundreds of calls and reports started coming in. A sailor in the U.S. Navy, upon seeing the photo, returned from duty and claimed the boy might be his younger brother. However, when the police investigated, they discovered his brother was alive and well in California. Others suggested the boy might be Stephen Damon, a child who had disappeared from Long Island. But after comparing fingerprints and descriptions, it turned out not to be him. Every day, the police chased a new lead, but each time, they hit a dead end. The detectives had a few physical pieces of evidence, but unfortunately, not much to go on. The first thing they investigated was the box itself. It was traced back to a store called J.C. Penney, located 24 kilometers from where the boy was found. From the code on the box, they learned it had contained a baby bassinet. The store had sold only 12 bassinets of that type between December 3rd, 1956 and February 16th, 1957. However, since most people in the 1950s paid in cash and stores didn't keep records of buyers, the lead went nowhere. Next was the blanket the boy was wrapped in. It was a cheap, low-quality blanket. The Philadelphia Textile Institute examined it and concluded it was manufactured either in North Carolina or Quebec, Canada. The problem was that these factories produced thousands of such blankets, which were sold everywhere. As a result, this lead also went cold. Among the items found was also a blue cap with a leather strap. The cap was traced to a small store in South Philadelphia called Robbins Bald Eagle. The store owner, Hannah Robbins, remembered the man who purchased the cap. She described him as a blond man in his late 20s, wearing work clothes, who had asked her to add the leather strap to the cap. Strangely, Hannah noted that the man resembled the boy in the photo. However, her testimony held little value, especially since the cap was also purchased with cash, leaving no records. As the police began to lose hope, they decided to expand their search radius. Every day, new details about the case emerged, each raising more questions. First, they checked every orphanage and childcare institution in the area, asking if any child of the boy's age had gone missing or run away. The answer was no in every case. Then, they broadened the search to schools, asking if any child had recently dropped out. However, as mentioned earlier, the child had no vaccination marks, meaning he likely hadn't attended school at all. The detectives also noticed something peculiar. The surgical procedures on the boy's body were professionally done, yet there were no hospital records of him anywhere. How could a child undergo surgery without any records? Dr. Thomas Bond, one of the most renowned forensic pathologists of the time, wrote in his report that the boy had died from a severe blow to the head. He also stated that whoever did this had knowledge of anatomy. The media was intensely interested in the case. Newspapers published new details every day, and people in Philadelphia began to fear that a professional killer was roaming the streets, murdering children. Everyone had a different theory, and the case grew more mysterious with each passing day. As the days went by, theories increased. People and investigators wanted to understand what could have happened to this child and who he was. The first theory suggested he might have been a victim of a child trafficking gang operating in the area. However, the police couldn't substantiate anything with this theory, so it was quickly dismissed. The second theory revolved around a family known as the Dudleys. They were arrested on charges of killing 10 of their children. This family worked in a traveling circus, and wherever they went, they would dispose of their children's bodies. When the police began investigating the matter seriously, it turned out that the child in question was not one of their children, and the family itself had never visited Philadelphia. Many theories began to emerge. Some people said the boy was being raised as a girl, and his hair was cut after his death to hide the matter, to the extent that the police created pictures of the boy with long hair wearing girls' clothes, hoping someone might recognize him. Amid all these theories, there was one man determined to uncover the truth no matter what. No one was as attached to this case as a man named Remington Bristow. He spent 36 years of his life trying to solve the mystery of the boy in the box. He was obsessed with the case to the extent that he created a mask resembling the boy's face and carried it in his bag, showing it to anyone who might help in the case. In 1960, Bristow arrived at a very strange theory. About 2 or 3 kilometers away from the place where the child's body was found, there was an orphanage run by a family named the Nicoletti family, consisting of Arthur Nicoletti, Catherine Nicoletti, and their daughter Anna Marie. When the police initially investigated, they found all the children present and accounted for, with no one missing. But Bristow wasn't convinced. He went so far as to consult a psychic in New Jersey. The psychic claimed she could learn things about people through items they had touched. Bristow brought her 2 pins from the box containing the boy, and the psychic described a large house with a wooden fence and a cabin in the garden. This description matched the house of the Nicoletti family. The idea grew in his mind to the extent that he brought the psychic to the site where the body was found. There, she walked directly toward the Nicoletti house, even though she had never visited Philadelphia before. His theory was that the boy in the box was the illegitimate son of Anna Marie, and they got rid of him after his death to avoid scandal for the family. Unfortunately, Bristow passed away in 1993, convinced his theory was correct, but he lacked any evidence. By 1998, science had advanced to a new stage, where DNA analysis could reveal secrets previously unknown. Investigators decided to take a very bold step, exhuming the boy's grave after 41 years. The process of exhuming the grave was extremely difficult. After all that time underground, the body was in a severely deteriorated state, with the bones completely fragile and the tissues decomposed. Forensic doctors tried to extract tissue samples, but the tests failed. In 2000, they decided to try again, this time focusing on the teeth, which are known to preserve DNA for a longer period. Unfortunately, the analysis failed again. Therefore, in 2001, they decided to send the sample to a private lab. The lab succeeded in extracting a specific type of DNA, known as mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited from the mother to her children. Through this analysis, they confirmed that the boy was not Stephen Damon, the child who disappeared from Long Island and was discussed earlier. This was the first time a suspect was scientifically ruled out. The story of the grave exhumation and DNA testing appeared on the show America's Most Wanted, and people were deeply moved when they learned that investigators were still trying to solve the case after all these years. This story brought the case back to the public's attention after it had nearly been forgotten. In 2002, a psychiatrist from Cincinnati contacted the police and said he had a patient who wanted to talk about something related to the boy in the box case. This patient, whom the police referred to as M or Martha, had a very strange story. Martha said that when she was 11 years old, her mother took her in a car to a house in Philadelphia. There, her mother handed an envelope, likely containing money, to a woman standing at the door, and she took a small child from her, put him in the car with them, and they drove away. They later named the child Jonathan. Martha claims that this child is the boy in the box. The terrifying part of the story is that Martha says her father was a science teacher and her mother was a librarian. Both were highly respected in front of others, but at home, they were monsters. She said they even tortured her and explained that her mother bought this child to do the same to him. The child, who never spoke and might have had autism, always lived in the basement, slept in a cardboard box, and used a small drain in the floor as a bathroom. He was never allowed to come upstairs except on rare days when her mother could tolerate him. One night, while taking a bath, he vomited the beans he had eaten earlier. Her mother lost her mind and beat him severely until he fell to the ground, and his head hit something, leading to his death. Afterward, her mother took him and made Martha help her. They got in the car and drove to Susquehanna Road, where they disposed of the body. The story included many details unknown to the public, such as the beans found in his stomach or the wrinkled state of his body due to water. The psychiatrist confirmed that Martha told him this story in 1989, years before the case was broadcast on television. However, the police couldn't believe her because there was no evidence to support her claims. Additionally, Martha had a history of mental illness. At the start of the new millennium, science began to change significantly. DNA analysis was no longer just a simple test. In 2019, the police decided to open the grave for a third time, this time equipped with a new technology called genetic genealogy. The concept involves taking a DNA sample, comparing it to a large database, and finding people from the same family, even distant relatives. Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, a genetic genealogy expert, explained that the boy's DNA was fragmented and scattered. In October 2021, a major breakthrough occurred in the case when they found a DNA match for the boy. This discovery opened the door to an entirely new family. Justin Thomas, the man who conducted the test, discovered that his mother was a first-degree relative of the boy in the box. The police approached her and requested that she also take a DNA test. It turned out that Justin's grandfather was either the boy's uncle or aunt. The investigators then began studying the entire family tree. When the police went to court and obtained a warrant to examine the birth, death, and adoption records of all children born to the potential mother, they found a birth certificate dated 1953 for a child believed to be him. In November 2022, the the Philadelphia Police Department officially announced that they had identified the boy in the box. On December 8th, they held a press conference where they revealed his full name, Joseph Augustus Sorelli. Born on January 13, 1953, Joseph lived only 4 years and died in the winter of 1957. His birth certificate existed, but he had no social security number, meaning he was not enrolled in any school or officially seen by any doctor. It was as though someone wanted to keep him hidden from the world. At the same time, it was evident that someone cared for him at some point in his life, as the surgical procedures on his body were professionally done. This indicated that a doctor or hospital treated him, but outside of official records. The question remains, what could lead a child from a respectable Philadelphia family to end up in a box dumped in the middle of the woods? In 1950s America, the idea of a woman giving birth out of wedlock was a significant disgrace, especially in Italian Catholic families. Could Joseph have been born to an unwed mother and then placed for adoption in an orphanage? But why did no one report his disappearance when he went missing? Why are there no official records? Some investigators believe Joseph may have had a disability or illness, which could explain the surgical procedures performed on him or why he didn't speak. As for Martha's story, if we assume it was true, and now, after we have learned his name, his birth certificate provided new information, including the father's name, the mother's name, and an address in Philadelphia. The Sorelli family was a large Italian family in Philadelphia, with ancestors who emigrated from Italy and built a new life in America. His father, Augustus Sorelli, was born on June 30th, 1926. He was a respected man with a successful construction company in the area. However, when the police revealed his identity, they faced a massive backlash on social media, with people assuming that he and his wife were responsible for Joseph's death without any evidence. At that point, the family lawyer, Dan Bush, came out and said that the family was attacked heavily and accused of things they didn't do, all without evidence. Because of this, the police started handling the case with great sensitivity, realizing that innocent people might be in danger if the police released too much information. On January 19, 2024, the Philadelphia Courier newspaper published the news that everyone had been eagerly awaiting. The mother of the child, Mary Elizabeth Abel, was born on October 20, 1931. She graduated from the Muriel Dobbins Technical High School in North Philadelphia in 1949. When she was 21, she had Joseph, and his father, Augustus Sorelli, was 26 at the time. Nobody knows what happened between Betsy and Augustus after that, because Betsy later married a completely different man, Joseph Blanket. Betsy died on June 22, 1991, at the age of 59. Now, investigators are trying to understand whether Betsy knew what happened to Joseph, or whether, when she saw his photo in the newspapers, she recognized him as her son. Alternatively, maybe she put him up for adoption when he was still a newborn and didn't know what he looked like. Unfortunately, Betsy took her secrets to the grave. After 65 full years, we now know who the child was, who his mother was, and who his father was, but there are still many unanswered questions. Who killed him? The forensic expert said he died from a severe blow to the head, as we mentioned before, and he suffered from malnutrition. His body was covered in bruises, which means he had been tortured before his death. Because of this, many people adopted Martha's story, in which she claimed that her mother bought the child to torture him. Why didn't the child speak? If we assume Martha's story is true, why was his hair shaved shortly before his death, or even after he died? Why was his body clean and washed when it was dumped as if he had just taken a bath? Captain Jason Smith of the Philadelphia Police said they have suspects, but they wouldn't know who yet. Are these suspects still alive, or has the real killer long since passed away with the secret? The case is still open, and the police are determined to find out who killed Joseph, even after 65 years. In the last press conference, Captain Jason Smith said, "We won't close the case until we know the full truth." Now, after learning who Joseph was, the story isn't over. There are still many questions that need answers, but at least the boy in the box is no longer America's unknown child. He now has a name, a family, and a story. In conclusion, the boy in the box case remains filled with questions that have yet to be answered. Was the killer one of the family members? And why was the child's disappearance covered up for all these years? I look forward to your opinions in the comments. For For those who want to hear this story on Spotify or dive deeper into the details, you can get the full ebook, which contains additional events and exclusive insights not covered in this video. You'll find all the links in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more gripping stories. Thank you for your support, and see you soon in a new tale.